I want to welcome to the show NFL writer Mark Schofield. Tonight.
I'm doing well, Trey. How you doing tonight, man?
I'm doing real good, Mark. Doing real good, Mark. Let's get right to it, Mark. It's the NFL Championship weekend. Let's start off with the NFC. It's the 49ers. It's the Eagles. Unlike the AFC, Mark, I look at the NFC as having two of the most complete teams in the NFL in the 49ers and the Eagles. And I believe that this game is going to come down to who can win in the trenches and who wins the line of scrimmage. Unlike the AFC, we got Joe Burrow and Patrick Mahomes, the great quarterbacks, in the AFC. In the NFC, I think we got more complete football teams. But do you believe that this game is going to come down to who wins at the line of scrimmage and in the trenches?
I do. I think both games actually, in a sense, will come down to who wins up front. I mean, playoff games tend to come down to what team's better in the trenches on a given night, on a given day. And I think your point about these two teams, the Eagles and the 49ers, being the most complete teams in football, is completely accurate. You look at the different ways, for example, the Philadelphia Eagles can beat you. They can beat you running the football. They can beat you throwing the football. They can do things defensively in a variety of ways to cause you problems. They're one of the best teams in the entire NFL at getting pressure with just four. They pressure quarterbacks at a rate of, I think, 34.6% of their pressures this year have come rushing just four. That's fourth best in the NFL. So they can get after you with four. They can drop seven into coverage. They can take away throwing lanes. They can play with numbers in the secondary. So they're a very complete football team. And the same thing goes for the San Francisco 49ers, who obviously have a lot of talent up front. You look at Bosa, you look at the Armstead, some of the other guys that they can come after you with a four up front. You look at Fred Warner, perhaps one of the best off-ball linebackers in the game. You look at, the guys that they have in the secondary. They're going to get tested. But this is a defense that's very good. And, of course, you look at what Kyle Shanahan does on the offensive side of the football, the way they can run the ball, the way they can use their sort of 21 personnel package where they've got, two running backs on the field and Kyle Juszczyk and Christian McCaffrey, but you've got Deebo Samuel who can line in the backfield. You've got McCaffrey who can line up outside. You can do different things that really stress you as a defense. And so these are two extremely complete football teams. I think it will come down to the trenches. I think Lane Johnson being back for Philadelphia is huge. Put off surgery, that torn adductor muscle, to play through the playoffs. He was fantastic last week against the Giants. Didn't look hurt at all. But I think that these two teams are so complete on both sides of the football that it's really hard to find a weakness.
I agree with you completely, Mark. Let's talk about Brock Purdy for a second. Obviously, Brock Purdy was the last pick of this past year's draft. They nicknamed him Mr. Irrelevant coming into the season. There was talks in San Francisco. Who's going to be the starter? Is it going to be Jimmy G? Is it going to be Trey Lance? They go with Trey Lance. He goes down in week 2. Jimmy G takes over. He ultimately gets injured. And then Brock Purdy takes over. And in 5 games, he has 13 touchdowns, 4 interceptions, completed 67% of his passes the last 5 games of the season, Mark. At some point, though, you have to believe that Brock Purdy is going to get rattled. Do you believe that this is the type of game where we see Purdy get rattled and that ultimately hurts the 49ers' chances at being able to beat the Eagles on Sunday?
Right, Trey. We've been waiting for the sort of bad Brock Purdy game, right? We've been waiting for it. We thought maybe against Dallas it would happen because similar to the Eagles, the Dallas Cowboys are very good at getting pressure with 4. Obviously, Micah Parsons is one of the best pass rushers in the league already, and he's still sort of learning to play on the edge because he was more of an off-ball linebacker at Penn State. And I think this environment, though, that he's going to be walking into on Sunday with a team that can, again, get pressure with 4 and a team that can do a lot of different things in the secondary. Jonathan Gannon, their defensive coordinator, has done a lot of different things in the secondary conceptually. They've used a lot of quarters, 2 high safeties at times, but they'll do some man coverage stuff. They'll do some man match, some pattern match stuff. And I think if you're going to see this season that sort of bad Brock Purdy game, Sunday's atmosphere might be the sort of environment that makes that happen, because I think this Eagles group up front, like we just talked about, is very talented. Obviously, Slay and Bradbury on the corners, 2 extremely talented corners who are playing at a high level. Chauncey Gardner-Johnson, I'm very curious to see, Trey, if he sort of gets the George Kittle assignment. I was rewatching the Eagles defense this earlier today. When they played the Steelers a couple of weeks ago, Pat Fryermuth, their tight end, it was Chauncey Gardner-Johnson who was covering him in man coverage situations. When they played Washington the first time, it was Chauncey Gardner-Johnson who was covering Logan Thomas. Yeah. So I'm pretty sure that you're going to see when they go man coverage, Gardner-Johnson, who's obviously an athletic defender, has played corner, played safety. He might get the George Kittle assignment. I think Purdy's going to have a tough time of it. I think he will.
Yeah, and it's crazy because I'm looking at Purdy going into this matchup, Mark, and it's like I don't believe he's going to have the luxury of playing with a lead in this game like he's had in previous games. And I'm just thinking, Mark, like Lincoln Financial Field, NFC Championship game. Like I said earlier, man, Gilly and Meek Mill's probably going to be there. Kevin Hart might show up. I believe that maybe, just maybe, Mark, that might be the time where we see the real Brock Purdy show up and get a little rattled. And I think that could be the difference maker in a game between two teams who are evenly matched.
Absolutely. And I think, it's going to be a much different environment for Brock Purdy this week. He's had the comfort of playing 2 playoff games at home. Yeah. Now you're going into an environment. We know what Lincoln Financial Field is going to be like. I mean, and when Debo came out a couple of days ago and basically said, Levi Stadium's just as loud, that's going to get that crowd fired up and rolling early. I mean, let's not forget, Eagles fans weren't allowed to tailgate for Saturday night's game. The gates didn't open until 1 p.m. on Lincoln Financial Field. So they figured out, wait, there's a lacrosse game at 1 p.m. The gates open at 8 a.m. So we'll buy tickets to the lacrosse game so we can tailgate for 12 hours before the game. Eagles fans are going to be ready to go. So, and in those 2 playoff games already, particularly the one against Seattle, if you remember before halftime, Purdy had a number of plays where he just sort of bailed out of a clean pocket, tried to make a late throw, and they fell incomplete. He didn't get punished for it. He seemed, like you said earlier, unsettled at times in the face of pressure. If the Eagles can get up 7-0, get up 14-3 or something like that, turn this into more of a one-dimensional Niners offense, it's going to be interesting to see how Purdy responds.
Agree 1,000%. Now, obviously, mid-season, Mark, general manager for the 49ers, they went out and picked up Christian McCaffrey from the Carolina Panthers. And during this 12-game win streak for the 49ers, McCaffrey has been great. He's averaged 112 scrimmage yards per game. That's 29% of the team's yards offensively. He has 12 scrimmage touchdowns. So how important is Christian McCaffrey going to be for this 49ers offense to be effective Sunday afternoon in Philadelphia?
He's critically important. I mean, and it gets back to sort of that 21 personnel package where they use, 2 running backs, a receiver, and 2 running backs, a tight end, and 2 wide receivers, right? But they are all interchangeable in that package. I mean, Deebo Samuel, we can align him in the backfield, you can align him out wide. McCaffrey is the same thing. You can put him running back, you can put him out wide. Juszczyk can be in the backfield, he can be a tight end. Kittle can be out wide. Brandon Ayuk is really the only one that plays his position, wide receiver. And every time I talk to NFL coaches, coordinators, head coaches, assistant coaches, they tell me that, look, this is a matchup-based league. We can draw stuff up on the whiteboard. We can get the X's and O's right. But ultimately, it comes down to, can this player win a one-on-one matchup with the player aligned across from him? And when you have an interchangeable offense the way the 49ers do, where, you can get them to play big on the defensive side of the ball, and suddenly you split Deebo and McCaffrey out wide, and they're running slant routes, option routes against linebackers and strong safeties, that's a very advantageous place to be. If McCaffrey is, healthy, ready to go, and is a part of that offense in the huddle on the field, he gives the Niners those matchups, that matchup flexibility, the ability to win, to create mismatches and then exploit them after the snap. Now, he's been a little bit limited this week in practice. Deebo's been a little bit limited. I expect they're going to go and everything, that they're going to be close to 100%. But they make that offense go. That versatility makes that offense go. And when you've got the ability to line up like they did against Seattle, with Deebo in the backfield, run a toss play to him, and then show them the same look 2 quarters later, but then throw a backside slant route to McCaffrey, who's aligned as an X receiver, That's very tough to game plan for. So Jonathan Gannon has his work cut out for him this week to game plan for all the different ways they could take those 5 players and use them in different alignments, in different packages, and on different concepts.
He's an NFL writer. It's Mark Schofield joining the Wise Guys Sports Show tonight. Mark, before we get to the Eagles offense versus the 49ers defense, I want to talk about the 49ers receivers. They got Brandon Ayuk. They got Deebo Samuel. This year, Deebo Samuel in 13 games played, 56 receptions, only 632 receiving yards, 2 touchdowns. And, I love Brandon Ayuk as well as a reliable number 2 receiver. There are Eagles fans out there, when they were talking about this game and comparing the two teams, there are Eagle fans that believe that A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith are better than Brandon Ayuk and Deebo Samuel. Which receiving core would you give the edge to? Would it be the 49ers with Samuel and Ayuk, or would it be the Eagles with Devontae Smith and A.J. Brown?
Yeah, I would give the edge to Philadelphia in terms of what Brown and Smith can do as wide receivers. Now, if you're going to ask me, okay, who's the better offensive weapon package, and I'd probably give, like we just sort of talked about, the edge to San Francisco because of the different ways they can create matchups. The fact that, you're not going to align Devonta Smith 7 yards behind the center and run him on inside zone. You're not going to do that with A.J. Brown, but you can do that with Deebo Samuel. You can run him on inside zone. You can run him on the crack toss design that they'd like to do, the play that I sort of referenced earlier. And so, look, these are all incredible players. And the skill players in this game, even though we both agree it's going to be decided in the trenches, the skill players in this game are fantastic. I think purely, though, in terms of like, if you're telling me, look, I can have 2 receivers, I could have a receiving duo, I'll take Brown, I'll take Smith. They're so talented and they work so well together. One of the reasons that, that acquisition of A.J. Brown was so huge for Philadelphia was it allowed them to play him in that X receiver role, take Devonta Smith, move him around a little bit, get him some free releases, some stack slots and things like that. They're complementary receivers that work extremely well together. It's a close, battle between those two groups, but I'd give the edge to Philly's guys.
Let's talk about the Eagles offense for a bit, Mark. Obviously, they led by quarterback Jalen Hurts. Jalen Hurts was on an MVP trajectory before his injury against the Bears. For the season under Jalen Hurts, the Eagles are 15-1. Their offense averages 29 points per game, 392 total yards per game, 34 rushing touchdowns as an offense. How important is it for Jalen Hurts in the passing game specifically? How important is it going to be for Jalen Hurts to be effective with that bum shoulder that he's been dealing with? He did look good against the Giants, but the game really wasn't in question at any point. How important is it going to be for Jalen Hurts to be effective with that shoulder injury?
I think it's important. One of the things, Trey, about Philly, and we've sort of alluded to this, is they can beat you in different ways. I mean, you look at some of the game, like their Green Bay Packers win, for example, where they just basically ran the football all over Green Bay. They could beat you running the football. If you turn them into a one-dimensional team, turn them into a run game team, they can beat you. Now, I think in this game, it would be super beneficial for the Philadelphia Eagles if Hurts could have some success early throwing the ball, because then you might get more of those too high safety looks. And one of the things that the Eagles are built to do is win in today's NFL when we see so many, 2 deep safety looks, cover 2, cover 4, quarter, half, where you've got that numbers advantage in the box. And then when you factor in using the quarterback as a run threat, that +1 in the box becomes a +2. Yeah. And then you're really sort of cooking with gas as a run game. And so if he can have some success early throwing the football, get them Echo Ryans to play some of those 2 deep safety looks, it's going to really create a numbers advantage in the box. They could start leaning into the run game a little bit, maybe wear on that defensive front, because if you're running the ball, it's a situation where if you can sort of run the ball a little bit, soften up that defensive front, wear on their legs a little bit. Then when you drop the throw in the third quarter, in the fourth quarter, that pass rush won't be what it was in the first quarter and the second quarter. So I think if you can have some success early, soften up that defense a little bit, run the ball a little bit, that's going to be key for them.
The 49ers defensively, Mark, as great as they are against the run, they're not that great against the pass. They give up 223 passing yards per game, which is ranked 20th in the NFL. A.J. Brown, he's going to probably be matched up with Tre'Davious Ward. Now, in the wild card matchup, Tre'Davious Ward gave up over 100 yards receiving to DK Metcalf. Metcalf and A.J. Brown are similar type receivers. So in that matchup with A.J. Brown versus Tre'Davious Ward, is that something that you believe that the Eagles should exploit in this football game?
Yeah, I mean, I think your point, Trey, about, DK Metcalf, A.J. Brown being similar receivers and the struggles that Ward had in the wild card route is a very accurate point. It's, completely correct. And I think if you're Philadelphia, if you're Shane Steichen looking at this game, you want to see if you could throw the ball. You're going to try to test those outside corners early. A lot of what they like to do in the passing game is vertical routes along the boundary. That's where DK Metcalf had some success on wild card weekend. I think you're going to try some of those shot plays early. Maybe you hit on some of those. Maybe it gets us to the scenario we were just talking about. You have some success downfield. That if you're Ryans, you might have to start thinking about dedicating some safety help, shading a safety or two. A name to sort of watch in this game, Trey, is Quez Watkins, because I'm curious to see if we see some too deep looks, if we see them trying to give some safety help over Smith, over Brown, if that frees up Watkins in the middle of the field out of the slot to have some success. But yeah, if I'm Philadelphia, I'm testing those outside corners early because that, look, the safeties are good. Fred Warner is one of the best linebackers in the game.
Yes.
The defensive line is good. I think you want to see if you can have some success in the passing game along the boundaries. Test those corners early. I think Philly's going to try to do that early and often.
Because, Mark, I thought last week the Cowboys, they had some opportunities offensively in the game against the 49ers defense. And Dak Prescott was turning the football over. Jalen Hurts ain't Dak Prescott. He's not going to turn the football over the way Prescott did. So I definitely believe that the Eagles overall offensively, if they can use their passing attack with Devontae Smith, with A.J. Brown, I think that could be a recipe for success for this Eagles offense overall.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Hurts can beat you in a number of ways, but I think you're going to see them test that secondary early. And if they can hit on some of those throws, hit on some of those boundary throws that Prescott missed on, he had an interception on one as well. If they can hit on some of those throws early, I think it's going to be a good night for them.
So, Mark, it's prediction time. Who do you have winning the NFC Championship, the 49ers or the Eagles?
I've got the Eagles with this one. And interestingly enough, I have the same score as you, 24-21. I mean, I think it's going to be close. I think these are two very evenly matched teams. But I just think Philly, with the different ways they can beat you, they are going to have a very good shot at winning this game. And then, look, we sort of talked about it. We teed it up a little bit. If we get that sort of iffy Brock Purdy game, he makes a mistake or two, I think it adds up to an Eagles win.
Okay, 24-21, the same score as me. Let's transition, Mark, to the AFC Championship, 6:30 p.m. kickoff at Arrowhead. It's Joe Burrow. It's Patrick Mahomes. It's the Bengals. It's the Chiefs for a second consecutive season for the rights to represent the AFC in the Super Bowl. What are your expectations for Joe Burrow versus Patrick Mahomes this Sunday?
I mean, these are the two of the game's young, dynamic quarterback talents. I mean, they're both fascinating to watch. They're both playing at an extremely high level. I mean, you watch Burrow over this playoff run, over their recent success this season, and the way he's doing it is getting the ball out quickly. Second fastest time to throw in this year in the regular season, second only to Tom Brady, fastest amongst all the playoff quarterbacks to this point in the playoffs. When there are all these questions going into that Buffalo game about, you're down 3 starters on the offensive line, how are you going to protect Joe Burrow? He's going to get the ball out of his hands. He's not going to give that pass rush a chance to get home. He's very good at, this is why they go 4 wide, 5 wide. It gives him an opportunity to see pre-snap what he wants to go with the football. And then, if you're going to take Tremaine Edmonds and put him over Jamar Chase, that's where he's going to go. He's going to go with, like I was just talking about, those matchups that give him a chance to be successful. But then there's Patrick Mahomes. And we continue to grade, and I'm as guilty as this as anybody else, we continue to grade Patrick Mahomes on such a different level. He's such an amazing talent at the quarterback position. Yes, the off-platform throws, the arm angles, the velocity, and all that stuff is great. But he, too, is breaking teams down with his mind. He, too, is seeing your coverage rotations and seeing where what you want to take away and seeing your pre-snap pressure looks and going where he needs to with the football. And so These are two fantastic quarterbacks to watch. They're two quarterbacks that every Monday morning, when I start watching film from the weekend, I turn on first because they're a ton of fun to watch. And I expect them to have good games this weekend.
And that's the thing, Mark. Like when you look at the quarterback matchup, I believe for Joe Burrow, there's so much that he can gain from if he wins this game and he goes on to win the Super Bowl. Like for me personally, if he beats Mahomes for a fourth consecutive time, and he beats Mahomes for the second consecutive season in the AFC Championship game in Mahomes' house, I don't think you can say he's necessarily the best quarterback in the NFL, but if he wins the Super Bowl, I believe we can have that conversation, and there's going to be certain people who are going to say that Joe Burrow is better than Mahomes is. On the flip side, if he beats Burrow and then he wins another Super Bowl, I think that's something that we're going to look at Mahomes when it comes to his overall legacy. But I think Burrow has an opportunity to elevate himself when it comes to the best quarterback in the NFL conversation and put himself right there alongside Mahomes if he beats him again.
Yeah, I mean, I think Burrow has sort of put himself in that, however you want to define or group elite quarterbacks, right? Whether you think top 5, top 7, he's put himself in that mix already. Win or lose on Sunday, I think what Burrow's done to this point in his career is put him in that, elite quarterback conversation. In terms of, if he wins this game and goes on to win a Super Bowl, is he QB1? I don't think I would go that far. But like you said, Trey, people will. If that's what ends up happening, if he wins Sunday, if he goes and beats either the Eagles or the Niners in the Super Bowl, there will be podcasts, radio shows, TV segments, you name it, about Burrow being QB1 going into next year. I mean, that's just the way we do it, right? Quarterbacks' legacies are basically decided week to week, because a couple of weeks ago, after they beat Tampa Bay, Dak Prescott was the guy, right? Like Dak Prescott, everybody loved him. He tore up Tampa Bay. Now it's, can they win a Super Bowl with Dak Prescott? Like this is the way the game works, right? And so if Burrow goes on and wins this AFC Championship game, beats Mahomes for the second straight year in an AFC Championship game, goes on and beats either Hurts or Purdy, we're going to go into next year with Joe Burrow is QB1. Now, like you said, on the flip side, if Mahomes wins his second Super Bowl in 4 years or so, and he does it on a right ankle injury because he's dealing with that high ankle sprain, you use the word legacy defining game, right? I mean, that will be that kind of run for it. So these are two incredibly talented quarterbacks. And what excites me most about this game is not just the fact that we're going to see it Sunday, that we might see this for the next 5, 6, 10 years. These guys, Lamar, Herbert, all the young quarterbacks in the AFC. I'm just so excited, Trey, to see these guys continue to play. Allen, all the great arms that we got, all the great quarterbacks that we got in the AFC side of things, whether it's Burrow and Mahomes this year, or whether it's, Herbert and Allen next year, Lamar or Herbert the year after that or whatever. The future of the quarterback position, particularly in the AFC, is so bright.
Absolutely, Mark. I agree with you 1,000%. Now, when it comes to this matchup specifically, let's talk about the Bengals offense versus the Chiefs defense. Last week, coming into the game against the Bills, everyone was talking about the Bengals. They were down 3 starting offensive linemen, no Jonah Williams, no Alex Kappa, no Lyle Collins. And I thought that Bengals offensive line last week, Mark, they played sensational. They had 172 rushing yards. Joe Mixon had arguably his best game of the season, 20 carries, 105 rushing yards, 1 touchdown. So going into this game against the Chiefs, how important is it for this Bengals running game to be effective?
We saw that when these teams played in the regular season. Mixon was out that game as Samaje Perine, and he had a pretty successful night, afternoon running the football against his Kansas City defense. And I think sort of similar to the Eagles discussion, right? You can run the ball, maybe wear on that pass rush a little bit, which is going to make it a little bit easier for that offensive line when Burrow drops to throw. Again, like you said, they're down some guys on the offensive line. And I think the other thing that's really interesting about this Cincinnati offense is, if you remember back to October, I mean, I wrote 3 or 4 different versions of this story, that the Bengals had some problems on offense. They were 2-3. They were very sort of predictable in the run game. They were, they were, if Burrow was in shotgun, they were throwing the football. If Burrow was under center, they were running it. They were very predictable in the run designs. It was all outside zone, wide zone, maybe some inside zone sprinkled in. Over the rest of the season, they've gone to more of a man gap power blocking scheme up front. And you saw a lot of that against Buffalo on Sunday. And so Zach Taylor deserves a ton of credit. Brian Callahan deserves a ton of credit for how they've sort of self-scouted this offense, broken some of their own tendencies. They're more balanced on offense. But like we saw when these teams played in the regular season, they had success running the football. It set up some of what they wanted to do in the past game. If that continues, it's going to bode really well for Cincinnati.
Now, obviously, the Cincinnati Bengals, their receiving core is arguably the best in the NFL, Mark. You got Jamar Chase, you got T. Higgins, you got Tyler Boyd, and they got Hayden Hurst, who I believe is an upgrade over C.J. Uzomah. So with the Bengals passing attack versus that Chiefs pass defense, who is ranked 18th in the NFL, who do you believe has the edge in that department, the receivers for the Bengals and the Chiefs pass defense?
No, I mean, I think the receivers for the Bengals, and for the reasons you just said, Trey. I mean, Jamar Chase has put himself into the top 5, 6, 7 receivers in the league already. And T. Higgins is on the outside of that group looking in and trying to bang his way in with a good playoff run here. And so, those are two very talented receivers. They're good with their route running. They're violent on their cuts and on their breaks. They're dangerous after the catch. And when you've got a quarterback in Burrow that can get the ball out quickly and is an accurate passer, he's putting those guys in position for yardage after the catch. And so it all works extremely well together. But look, Hurst, Boyd, they've got more than just Higgins and Chase. It's a very talented group. They're sort of 11 personnel with the 3 receivers and tight end. It's a very talented group. I would definitely give the edge to those Bengals receivers.
For sure. And honestly, Mark, I think defensive coordinator Steve Spagnuolo, he has his work cut out for him this week, because if you blitz Burrow and you leave your DBs in man-to-man coverage, Burrow is going to eat you alive, because Jamar Chase can take a 3-yard slant and take it 60 yards for a touchdown. And T. Higgins, we know, how dynamic of a pass catcher he is with his ability to go and grab the football at his highest point. So I think that Chiefs defense, man, they got that work cut out, because if you blitz man to man, I think the Bengals can win in those situations. But if you play zone and you can't get to Burrow, I think that gives Burrow time to carve you up and throw the football down the field as well.
Yeah, I mean, Steve Spagnuolo is very much facing a sort of pick your poison kind of afternoon, because if you, like you said, sort of drop 7, drop 8, play zone coverage, try to, constrict throwing lanes and things like that, Burrow's just going to be comfortable taking what you give him. If you're going to give him the 5-yard stick route, he'll take that. He'll take that all day long. He has no problem throwing underneath. If you decide, look, we're going to bring pressure, we're trying to get after him, force him to make some quick reads and decisions. Well, one, as we talked about, he likes getting the ball out quickly. That's where he likes to be. Number 2, adjusted completion percentage this year, according to Pro Football Focus, of 72% when pressured. That was 4th best in the NFL. He's so poised under pressure. You watch him in the pocket, and ESPN's Darren Orlovsky did a video on this earlier in the year. His technique when pressured is teaching tape. Doesn't drop his eyes. That left hand is glued to the football. He's so good with his feet at creating space in the face of pressure. So, yeah, go after him. Blitz him all you want. He's just as happy when he's blitzed, when he's pressured, when he's not.
And the Bengals can run the football, Mark. So because they can run the football, if you drop 8 back in coverage, they'll happily hand the ball off to Joe Mixon and Pirine. Yep. So that's going to be important. I got a key stat for you. It's amazing what Joe Burrow has done since he's been the starting quarterback for the Bengals. This is in 52 years before Joe Burrow. The Bengals had 5 playoff wins, 2 AFC Championship game appearances. Under Joe Burrow, the Bengals had 5 playoff wins, 2 AFC Championship game appearances in 3 years. So it's amazing how Joe Burrow has completely changed the Cincinnati Bengals organization, Mark. And honestly, the Bengals are going to be contenders in the AFC for the next 15 years on the Joey B. It's the reality of what has happened since he's been drafted by the Cincinnati Bengals.
And he's already in his second NFL playoff run, the franchise's all-time leader in quarterback wins in the playoffs. When he hit Chase for that touchdown early against Buffalo, he became their all-time yardage passing leader in the playoffs. And this is just his second stint in the NFL playoffs. It's the turnaround in Cincinnati has been incredible. And obviously, look, there's more to it. There's Chase, there's Higgins, there's the guys up front, there's the defense, there's the coaching. But Burrow has been fantastic for this franchise.
He really has. Now, next factor for me, Mark, for the Chiefs defensively is going to be Chris Jones, their defensive tackle. Chris Jones is going to have to create havoc up front because the Bengals are playing with backup offensive linemen. So I think Chris Jones has to win his matchup with those Bengals offensive linemen who are backups. That's the one chance I give the Chiefs defensively against this Bengals offense. Chris Jones has to be dominant in this game.
Yeah, and what's one of the biggest bugaboos, one of the biggest things that gives quarterbacks fits? It's quick interior pressure, right? Like quarterbacks, we love it when it's coming off the edges because we can step up in the pocket or, if we feel like you could spin around it or whatever. Quick interior pressure, it's tough to avoid. It's tough to escape from. And it throws all this timing we've talked about, right? Quick time to throw, getting the ball out quickly, taking what the defense gives you. If you've got a defender in your lap through the A gaps, a half a second, 1 second into the down, that throws all of that out the window. And so if Jones can get going against this interior of the Bengals offensive line, that would be huge for Kansas City.
Now you look at Patrick Mahomes, Mark, he has an 8-3 record, 30 touchdowns, 7 interceptions, 3,576 passing yards, completing 67% of his passes. Obviously, he's dealing with an ankle injury right now. So how effective do you believe Mahomes is going to be, despite us already knowing he's not going to be 100% going into this game?
I think he'll still be effective, Trey. I think, what we've seen from Mahomes over the years, and he said it after the game Sunday, he said it all throughout this week already, is that he can make almost any throw from any platform, from any arm angle. The arm talent is eye-popping. The fact that he doesn't have the sort of 100% right ankle to drive off, that's not going to matter to Patrick Mahomes. Now, the question is going to become, and we won't really know this until Sunday, one, his mobility in the pocket. How comfortable is he moving around, or is he going to be more statuesque? And two, how comfortable is the coaching staff, Andy Reid, Eric Bieniemy, how comfortable are they doing some stuff where he's designed rollouts, sprint outs, boot action, some of the stuff that they've used from time to time? I mean, they opened their game against Jacksonville with speed option, with him sprinting to the edge to pitch it to the back. Like, are they going to feel comfortable enough in that right ankle to do things like that, to have concepts like that in the game plan? Or is it going to be, look, we have to treat him as a backup pocket, as a drop back pocket passer in this game? And so I think, look, Mahomes, the throws and all that stuff, I'm not worried about that. I'm worried about the pocket mobility, and I'm wondering, Trey, is the game plan going to be different because they don't feel comfortable having designs like that in the script, in the package of plays, because of that ankle injury, because he might be limited with that mobility?
Now, over the last 3 matchups, defensive coordinator Lou Admiral, he's had Mahomes' number, Mark, and what the Bengals do is they have 3 down linemen, and they drop 8 back in coverage against this Chiefs offense. And one of the, I guess you could say, criticisms of Andy Reid throughout his coaching career has been, will he be patient? Will he run the football when those opportunities are going to be there? How important is it going to be for the Chiefs offensively to run the football with Pacheco and with McKinnon to kind of attack that Bengals 3 down linemen and that 8 in coverage? How important is it going to be for that Chiefs rushing attack?
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest word for the Chiefs this game and perhaps this season is patience. You have to have patience if you're Mahomes, particularly when they're dropping 8 into coverage. You have to have patience if you're Andy Reid. If it's 7-0 early, you're trailing. Stick to the game plan, stick to the script, run the football a little bit if you're going to get those 3 down, 8 up kind of looks. Don't panic, don't overreact. If you think back, Trey, to that AFC Championship game last year, in the second half, they did a lot of that drop 8 stuff, and Mahomes was pressing to try to make things happen. The interception in overtime came against one of these drop 8 looks. And so going into this year, the question was, how is he going to fare against those drop 8 looks? Because he saw them a lot last year, and he had his ups and downs, more downs than ups, certainly the AFC Championship game. This year, however, 38 of 63 for 549 yards and 4 touchdowns against drop 8 coverage. So he's been better at it, but Cincy, he had 5 throws against Cincy in the regular season a couple of weeks ago, only hit on 1 of 5. So it's still going to be an issue. He needs to be patient. Reed needs to be patient. If they have the opportunity to run the football a little bit, they're going to take advantage of that. Try to get them out of those drop 8 looks to see if they can get perhaps some one-on-one matchups in the passing game.
Now, we know the best player on this Chiefs offense is Travis Kelce, Mark, for the season. 110 receptions, 1,338 receiving yards, 12 touchdowns. What kind of game do you think Travis Kelce is going to have on Sunday?
I mean, every time he laces them up, I expect big things. I mean, he's perhaps the best receiving tight end we've seen in recent history, maybe all time. I mean, guys like Tony Gonzalez and Gronk and others can certainly make a case. He's so dangerous after the catch. So much of what they do in the passing game sort of stems from Kelce and or the fear of Kelce when they go Y ISO, when they move him around a little bit. You have to account for where 87 is. Von Bell, Mike Hilton, the guys who are going to be matched up with him, they're going to face their challenges. And particularly if you're trying to get the ball out of Mahomes' hand quickly, quicker throws over the middle, stick routes to the outside, try to get Kelce involved. They use him in the screen game too. I'm expecting Kelce to have a big game.
Last year in the regular season, the Bengals overcame an 11-point deficit, and they beat the Chiefs 34-31, Mark. Last year in the AFC Championship game, the Bengals overcame an 18-point deficit, and they beat the Chiefs 27-24. Earlier this season at Paycor Stadium, the Bengals trailed the Chiefs by, I think it was at least 7 points in that game, and they beat the Chiefs again. Who you got Sunday in the AFC Championship? Do you have Burrow or do you have Mahomes?
I've got Burrow in this one. I think it'll be close. I'm picturing like 28-24 Cincinnati. You just walked us through, Trey, those last 3 meetings. And there's some history that I think is important. In those games, Cincinnati would get down, but they wouldn't panic. This is a young team, young stars, quarterback, receiver, and elsewhere, but they're a veteran team. What I mean by that is they don't panic. They don't overreact. They get down by 2 digits. They get down by multiple scores. They don't panic. They don't overreact. They stay within themselves. They play their game. Going into Arrowhead again, it's not going to bother them. If they get down in this game, 10-0, 14-0, it's not going to bother them. And I just really like the kind of football they're playing right now on both sides of the ball. Mahomes being banged up, it might limit some of what they do schematically. And so I like Cincinnati in this one.
He's Mark Schofield, an NFL writer. Mark, let everyone know where they can find you.
Well, Trey, thank you so much for having me on Twitter at Mark Schofield. I keep it nice and easy. It's right there. Wait, there it is. There we go. Right there. SBNation.com. Thanks so much for having me. Enjoy the games this weekend, everyone. It's going to be a ton of fun.
Thank you, Mark, for joining us on the Wise Guy Sports Show. He is Mark Schofield of the NFL Insider, great writer. Go and check out all his content on Twitter and on social media. Thanks for calling in tonight, Mark.
Thanks so much. Have a great night.